And then you get to a spot where God, who's been demanding that we slaughter animals and burn them because he likes barbecue, is now decided that he's going to come down and take human form and sacrifice himself to himself for a weekend to fix everything for everybody. That's blood magic. That is sacrificial blood magic thinking and nothing to do about human value. Why you care about that standard, just like you don't have an objective reason why you care about a God. If there was a God, he should come along and kind of clarify all this. I would think that would be a duty. But the beautiful story that you're talking about, where the most powerful being comes down and becomes a cell, becomes one of the weak, one of the fallen, in order to save them. That's an incredibly nice way to package it, but I have, I guess, a completely different take on it, because the story is a little different. The story starts in Genesis, where God creates everybody, and then it all screws up, and then he tries to fix it, and it screws up, and he tries to fix it, and it screws up. It's this parade, it's this comedy of errors. And then you get to a spot where God, who's been demanding that we slaughter animals and burn them because he likes barbecue, is now decided that he's going to come down and take human form and sacrifice himself to himself for a weekend to fix everything for everybody. That's blood magic. That is sacrificial blood magic thinking and nothing to do about human value.
Who actually believes that? What you just described as a summary of Christianity. Who actually believes?
How could you not? Did God come down and become human, sacrifice himself?
God the Son became God our brother.
He's still God.
God the Son became God our brother. Right? But the Son of
are you a non-Trinitarian? Sorry?
That's precisely because I'm Trinitarian. God the Son became God our brother, full of the Holy Spirit, in order to unite us as family back to the same source, back to the Father. This is basic Trinitarian theology.
Did God not sacrifice himself?
The Father sent the Son.
But they're the same.
They're not the same.
They're part of the Trinity.
Yeah, they are definitely.
They are one, right?
They are definitely part of the Trinity.
Are they one, though?
They are united, absolutely. The Father, Son, and Spirit.
United. I mean, we're united at a table, but we're not one.
The Father is in the Son, and the Son is in the Father, so that they are united on a level that is far superior to ours. But they are
why does there need to be a
person.
blood sacrifice?
Well, because to walk away from God, to be disconnected from life, means death, right? And in the Bible, the life is in the blood.
Well, who made that rule?
It's the nature of the case, don't you think? If God is life, God is a source of life.
Couldn't God have done it differently?
Well, if God is the source of life, and we reject life, what does that leave us with? Death. If God wants to unite with us in our death, what will he have to take on? Our death.
So you're talking, first of all, you're speaking kind of metaphorically here, because I'm not rejecting life. I'm rejecting a proposition that there's some eternal life because I don't see sufficient evidence for it. If there is, cool. But God, this notion, why does there need to be a blood sacrifice at all? At some point we were running around killing animals and doing it because God loved the smell of burning flesh. Literally, it says that. Now, while it's, I know what part of the objection is. It's like the Easter story when atheists will say, and then the zombies rose up and marched on Jerusalem, and people will be like, there's nothing in the Bible about zombies, but it does talk about the dead getting up out of their graves and going in there. And so it's a colloquialism to refer to it as zombies. I don't think even the atheists, by and large, are thinking that we're talking Walking Dead here, but it's a shorthand to show that there's something that's potentially absurd here, an extraordinary claim that doesn't have evidence for it. This isn't even that. This isn't even an extraordinary claim that doesn't have evidence for it. This is, to me, bizarre. What is it about killing something that God needs you to do in order for God to forgive you? Because if God is the creator of everything, including the rules of how all this works, couldn't he have come up with rules that don't involve killing things?
Matt is right to challenge the idea that morality requires blood. Historically, the concept of sacrifice, especially human or animal, was common in Bronze Age cultures long before Judaism or Christianity. The idea that a god demands blood to fix what he created flawed in the first place isn't moral. It's borrowed mythology, not ethical reasoning. Modern moral philosophy doesn't rely on ancient rituals. In fact, research in evolutionary biology and neuroscience shows that cooperation, empathy, and fairness evolved naturally in human and even primate societies. Frans de Waal's studies on bonobos and chimpanzees show that these animals exhibit moral behaviors like sharing, consolation, and even punishment of unfairness without any concept of religion. Morality comes from being social, not from Scripture. Matt also highlights a logical contradiction. If God is all-powerful and all-knowing, why couldn't he create a system where forgiveness doesn't require killing? The idea that the life is in the blood isn't a deep truth. It's a line from Leviticus, tied to Iron Age ideas about purity and atonement. And if Christianity's resurrection story were historical, we'd expect some mention outside the Bible. But no Roman, Greek, or Jewish historians of the time, not even Philo or Josephus, recorded a mass resurrection in Jerusalem. That's a huge red flag for anyone asking for evidence. The truth is, we can be moral, we can build a better world, and we can do it without myth, magic, or sacrifice. Let's continue, and let's hear what Glenn has to say.
Mm-hmm. Well, I mean, first of all, the priest was many other things, but he was also your butcher, right? You would eat the lamb after you sacrificed it. You would eat the bull. You know, we still go to the butcher. We still sacrifice our animals. And in that sacrifice, even today, in a very secular sense, the death of that animal means our life. In that very literal sense, okay, that animal dies so that we might live. And it's just that in the Old Testament, it was also teaching a spiritual dimension. On top of the barbecues that we all love. You're from Texas, I'm from Australia, we love barbecues, okay?
The vegans are going to hate us.
It was a great conversation with Cosmic Skeptic, by the way. On top of that butchery, there was also a spiritual lesson being taught, and the spiritual lesson being taught was not that the blood of this bull is paying for your sin, but that there is a Messiah who is coming who will pay for your sins. Because no, the blood of goats and bulls cannot pay for sin, but God can take responsibility for his handiwork, and God did take responsibility for his handiwork, and it was his death that actually paid for sin. That's the story.
There's nothing, I'm not saying that secular humanism guarantees a better world. But even if we take what Glenn's saying, even if you were to look at this as Christianity light without the God thing, I would already view that as better because A, we guarantee that we have humans' best interests at heart. That's humanism. It's the foundation of it. You can say, and you would be correct, that it's just a bold, bald assertion that we should care about humans. Okay? I have no response to that. I don't even know why anybody would want to come up with a response. There's nothing that says the world will be better this way, except for this. I did a debate in a Church of Christ where I told them I could write a better book than the Bible and I could prove it to them. Because I could rewrite it word for word, reverse its position on slavery, and it would be a better book. Because for the people who are looking at this, not so much as metaphorical lessons or like that, if they're looking at this as an instruction book for life, that book advocates slavery. That's not even a question. If you were to say, thou shalt not own a human being as property, that would be better than saying you can and that you can pass them on. And so this was the example I used for the people who are kind of like Bible worshipers, not the people who go in looking for, hey, there's an interesting message here, or there's going to tell me something about my life, but no, this is literally word for word, blah, you know. That type of mindset is probably more responsible for the harm and damage that a lot of us would lay at the foot of Christianity than Glenn's version. For sure. I mean, I don't think Glenn's pro-slavery at all. And when you start looking at things where you are finding a way to take a message that could easily be viewed as this is a blood magic sacrifice and say, well, life has to consume life to exist, and you want to kind of maybe blow off why God would have made it that way or why it had to be made that way, which is a weird and interesting theological discussion. Getting rid of those things and keeping the good parts is all I've advocated for ever. And secular humanism, to me, is taking the good parts, whether they're found in Christianity, Judaism, Scientology.
Glenn tries to reframe ancient blood sacrifice as symbolic or meaningful, saying it teaches a spiritual lesson. But that ignores the obvious. It still hinges on the idea that killing something is required for forgiveness. That's not moral. That's Bronze Age thinking. No modern legal or ethical system requires an innocent third party to suffer so someone else can be forgiven. That would be unjust. And saying life consumes life doesn't explain anything about divine justice. It's a biological fact, not a moral one. In nature, predation is about survival, not redemption. To tie that to sin and sacrifice is a category error. Worse, Glenn admits the blood of bulls couldn't pay for sin, so God killed himself to satisfy his own rules. That's not profound. That's convoluted. An all-powerful being wouldn't need a workaround involving torture and execution. Matt's comparison to secular humanism is simple and accurate. It doesn't guarantee a better world, but it gives us tools that actually work. Morality based on well-being is measurable. We can study what reduces suffering and increases flourishing. No divine command needed. And when Matt points out that rewriting just one verse to say don't own people would improve the Bible, he's right. That's not nitpicking. That's moral clarity.
Well, Matt said that he could write a Bible that's superior to the Bible by reversing its position on slavery. I think if you started from scratch without the Bible, though, I don't think you, and I don't think anyone has written a book or a series of books or a collection of books, a library of books, that has done what the Bible has done for slavery in the world. Because slavery is a human universal, and it has not been overturned by anyone other than those who took the Bible seriously back in the 18th century. They were evangelical Christians, they were Quakers, they were people who took the Bible seriously. So
parts of it seriously.
It's a longer discussion about how you take the Old Testament. But that's got to be interesting, at least, because we can't do a compare and contrast. There's no A/B testing about this. Okay, there's only
which I think kind of undermines what you were just saying. And sorry, I don't mean to interrupt, but I'm in agreement with you. Mm-hmm. You're viewing it as nobody else has done this, and you don't think anybody else could. And my thing is, we have no way to find that out because we live in a world where this is the way things happened. And so to argue that you couldn't actually write a list of moral precepts from scratch that are superior to Christianity.
Well, but then aren't you saying, at least with the Christian side, we've got, there is one group of people that has guaranteed universal equality for all human beings and has ended the slave trade. Okay, it might have taken far longer than you would have wanted it to have taken. But there is one group of people who have done that. We don't know if anyone has or could do that. Let's give it a go anyway. Let's walk away from this thing that has given us all these benefits of the universities and the hospitals and the schools and the scientific method and the emancipation of the slaves and all this sort of stuff. Let's walk away from that. That's quite a leap of faith, don't you think?
And am I also getting the sense, Glenn, that I want to come back to this human at the centre of this, and the fact that Matt says, hey, humans are humans, and it's natural that we're going to prefer ourselves, and that's where the morality comes from, our own best interests. And you're saying, no, somehow Christianity has actually grounded an intrinsic dignity to the human that Matt's godless ethics isn't necessarily going to support. It might go in that direction for a moment, but there's no ultimate foundation to it. Is that what I'm hearing?
Yeah, absolutely. We are always going to look after ourselves, but who is we and who are ourselves in that conversation? And we are always wanting to narrow the circle around us and our mates and exclude the other tribe and exclude the other kinds of people. So, in the news here in the UK, just recently they brought in a non-invasive prenatal test for Down syndrome. And it had the reliable effect that everybody knew it was going to have. As people knew that they were going to have children with Down syndrome, they aborted them at ever higher rates. And yet the headlines said, children with Down syndrome down 30%. And it sounded like people had found a cure for Down syndrome or something like that. They hadn't found a cure for Down syndrome. They'd just drawn the circle around humanity and kept those with that condition on the outside and wanted to eliminate them. And that, to me, is a very chilling way of proceeding with a kind of a humanism. Because that's always the danger. Who is us? Who are those who we are going to grant with the right to life? And who are those who we are going to say, they do not qualify? And it's always tempting for the humans to say, okay, it's the strong who will make the decision, and it's the weak who must take the hindmost. What is it that's going to stand up for all humans regardless of capacity, regardless of attributes, regardless of achievements, who is it who's going to stand up for all humans and actually be true humanists and grant them human rights too?
This is the problem is, so first of all, whether or not that abortion scenario that you're talking about is humanism or not is subject for a whole nother debate. But you say, well, nobody could do this. And then when we talk about, here's a list of precepts where we don't include a God in it, then your answer is, now you're just borrowing from Christianity. It's Christianity light, and you've just removed the God. And then the other objection that you're going to launch to secular morality is, what's going to be the foundation beyond this? At least we have a foundation. It's God. Well, what if people don't accept your foundation? That is exactly the same objection that you are leveraging, you're launching at secular humanism. Whatever problems secular humanism may have with regard to foundations of ethics, no religious foundation has any way of solving that. Because ultimately, until some God comes in and says, I am in fact the God of the universe and I am the moral authority, and people are forced to recognize that this is the case, then the only thing that's happening is Glenn's saying God is the foundation of morality and I'm saying humans are, and nobody is going to be, neither of those systems is going to work for people who don't accept that that's a foundation.
Do people have to all recognize this foundation in order for it to be the foundation?
No, people don't need to recognize that 2 + 2 = 4 for it to be the case that 2 + 2 = 4, and for you to go to your grave proclaiming that 2 + 2 = 4. Even if the whole world said it was otherwise, then 2 + 2 would still equal 4. People don't need to recognize a moral truth to be a moral truth for it to be moral.
They do if you're talking about a moral system. If you want to create, computer code and get people to start programming in it, you've got to be able to convince them about ones and zeros.
Yeah.
So 2 + 2 = 4 isn't even in the same ballpark of there is a God. It's either true or it's not, but it's not a foundation for something. If you're talking about a moral system, the true foundation is agreement on what the foundation is, that the three of us care about human beings. And then we can start arguing about how much we care and where there's going to be conflicts and everything else. But we can't do any of that until we agree on that foundation. And if Glenn's foundation is there's a God at the bottom of this and he can't demonstrate that, then we're not even going to get started on solving the problem.
That's not what 2 + 2 = 4 is the analog of in this conversation. 2 + 2 = 4 is the analog of all human beings are worthy of provision and protection. All of them. Right? Would you agree with that? All members of the human family, no matter what their achievements, no matter what their attributes, all members of the human family are worthy of all provision and protection.
I have no idea.
That's a problem. It's definitely a problem, especially when you've got people who are discovering disabled children in the womb.
When I say I have no idea, it's about that simplification. My instinct is, of course, to say yes.
Glenn argues that Christianity offers a unique foundation for universal human dignity, but history doesn't support that. The Bible never clearly condemns slavery, genocide, or misogyny. In fact, it often reinforces them. Yes, some Christians helped end slavery, but they did it by rejecting biblical passages, not following them. And many use the exact same scriptures to defend slavery, segregation, and oppression for centuries. Matt's right to point out that a moral system doesn't need divine command. Morality comes from understanding human needs, preventing harm, and promoting well-being. We know this from decades of research in moral psychology and ethics. Thinkers like Peter Singer, Judith Jarvis Thompson, and John Rawls have laid out secular moral systems built on fairness, empathy, and justice, without invoking gods, blood, or fear. Glenn's example about Down syndrome and abortion is emotionally charged, but it's misleading. Decisions about reproductive health are individual moral dilemmas, not a product of secular ethics trying to erase anyone. Humanism says every person matters because they are a person, not because a holy book says so. That includes people with disabilities, the elderly, and even people with whom we disagree. And Glenn's last move, saying, God is the foundation, whether you believe it or not, misses the point entirely. You can't build a moral system on something unprovable and expect universal agreement. Matt is right. A shared foundation only works if people agree on it. And right now, the only thing we can agree on is this: We're human. We want to suffer less, and we're better off when we treat each other with dignity and care.
You both think or believe will happen after you die?
I imagine my wife will get married to somebody else, and actually, she's going to run off with a friend of hers and have a whole bunch of cats. Oh, you mean what's going to happen to me? I don't know. I don't see any reason to think that anything's going to happen to me. Everything that makes me me, everything that we have historically and religiously attributed to a soul that can be identified with a place has a place in the brain. My personality is in my brain. We know from experiments on people who have suffered all sorts of brain damage that you can reset people's personality, their preference, their memories, their ability to make new memories. I'm going to get the name wrong. Vishwanathan. Somebody will know. Anyway, did a talk at one of the religion summits about a split brain patient, hemispherectomy. They can communicate with both halves, and each half has a separate personality and a separate identity and communicates independently. One half, Christian. The other half, atheist. Now, I guess you could argue that when we split that brain in half, there was only enough soul for one side, and the other side just got, shafted. But everything we know about what makes us us, our likes, our preferences, our desires, they're all a product of the brain. Now, a lot of theists would say that there's a soul behind it all, as a puppet master, the ghost in the machine. And yet there's no evidence to support this. And it doesn't make sense in the model. If I suffer severe brain damage and all of a sudden I don't remember the past, I don't remember that I love my wife, I don't like the same foods, I don't want to interact with the same people, and now all of a sudden I believe in God, am I the same person? I don't think so. Haven't we really kind of ended up with a whole new person? I have an argument that I use partially as a joke. It's an argument that demonstrates, according to some traditions, nobody's in heaven, and it's really easy. In heaven, there's no suffering and no sadness, according to some traditions. My mom is convinced she's going to heaven. She's convinced I'm going to hell. I don't know who's going to end up in heaven, but it won't be my mom. There's no way my mom could be up in heaven, not suffering and not sad that her son is in hell. And if God does some kind of magic to take that out of her, it's not my mom anymore. It's a facsimile of my mom. Some kind of robotic worshiping thing that's not my mom. My mom and I disagree vehemently on religious stuff, so much so we don't talk about it anymore because we love each other. We'd like to have a civil, Thanksgiving or Christmas or whatever religious holiday drives me up there to visit and hang out. By the way, we celebrate Christmas, have a big white tree with peppermints and stuff on it. It's awesome. Entirely secular stuff. We're stealing it back because Christianity stole most of those things from other religions. And Easter too, but I'm not that big on eggs and candy because I'm diabetic. But everything that we know about us takes place in our brain. The brain gets damaged. Are you the same person? I don't know. The math on souls is confusing. Sam Harris has talked about the math on souls for people who believe that zygotes get a soul because the embryo will sometimes split and then we get together. So when it splits, does it have two souls? And then when it comes back together, does it just have one? Or now do we have a body with two souls? Or did we not put a soul in until afterwards? Or does it happen when he breathes his first breath, as the Jews believed? It doesn't make any sense. The math on souls doesn't make sense. The science on souls doesn't make any sense. There's no reason to think that there's some kind of ghost dictating what goes on in my brain. We haven't even gotten into free will. Cliff keeps asserting that we have it. I'm not convinced we do, at least not in the sense that he's talking about. I don't know what's going to happen to me when I'm dead. I'm pretty sure my body's going to rot, my brain's going to stop working, and I will cease to exist. And it didn't bother me before I was alive, so I don't see what bothered me afterwards.
When Matt says everything we are, our thoughts, memories, personality, comes from the brain, he's not just guessing. We have real evidence for that. Brain scans show that damage to specific areas can completely change how a person behaves. People with strokes or brain injuries sometimes lose their ability to recognize loved ones, form memories, or even control their emotions. There's also the famous case of split brain patients. When the brain is divided, each half can act like its own person, sometimes with completely different beliefs. If a soul were running the show, how does that even make sense? Matt brings up a good point about heaven, too. If someone you love goes to hell, but you're not sad in heaven, are you really you anymore? It sounds more like a version of you with your emotions turned off. That's not comforting. It's unsettling. And scientifically, we've never found any evidence of a soul. No energy, no signal, no mechanism. It's all based on belief, not observation. Now, let's hear what Cliff has to say about this.
Guys, we got to be honest with each other. If there is no God, we know exactly what happens when we die. If there is no God, there's no life after death. If there is no God, you are matter and energy. And when you die, the matter and energy fall apart. So let's not act like maybe there's life after death. No, that's illogical. If there is no God, when you die, when I die, we become fertilizer. Very logical, very reasonable. But you know what the problem is? The problem is that I've got to do funerals for families that are atheist or agnostic. Inevitably, what happens to me is I'm standing there and they're coming up to me saying, well, you know, maybe, the Great Spirit. Excuse me? Great Spirit? What are you talking about? If there is no God, there's no spirit. There's matter and energy. And when we die, the matter and energy falls apart. Now, don't get scared. Just face reality. Be objective. And don't allow your fears to get you knocking your knees saying, oh, well, maybe. Oh, well, possibly. No. Be rational. Use your good mind. If there is no God, when you die, you rot. When I die, I rot. End of story. Just think about it. Now, there's an alternative to that. And the alternative is that if there's a supernatural God, then possibly there is life after death. And I can promise you, I would never believe there's life after death because I'm scared to die. That's being a wimp. That's being a coward. Instead, you'd better use your brain, and you better start thinking, and you better figure out, does the evidence point to there being something more to reality than matter and energy, there being some type of God, or does there not? And then secondly, you better use your brain, and you better think real clearly. Does the historical evidence point to Jesus having died and risen from the dead or not? And I can promise you, if you believe there's life after death because you're scared to die, you're an intellectual wimp. And I would never believe there's life after death because I find it attractive. And Matt is wrong. I don't believe there's life after death because I've got this deep longing for life after death. But I'll tell you exactly what I do. If I find that I have a deep longing for something, I look at the evidence to find out, is there any truth to it or not? And if there's no truth to it, I drop it. But if there is evidence to support it, I would be very wise to follow that evidence. Now, why do I believe there's life after death? First of all, because the evidence says there is a supernatural God. And second of all, because the historical evidence is that Jesus was dead, and 3 days later, he rose from the dead. And the people who saw him risen from the dead died for, not for belief, they died for what they claimed to have seen, the dead Christ risen from the dead. If you claim to have seen something, like Matthew, Mark, John, Thomas, Philip, Andrew, Peter, if you claim to have seen the dead Christ risen from the dead, and then you stand before Roman soldiers, and the Roman soldiers say Caesar is Lord and live, or else maintain that your Jesus is risen from the dead, and we will execute you for it. And if you stand there and say, I'm sorry, I've seen Jesus risen from the dead, that gives your claim tremendous credibility. So the evidence is Jesus rose from the dead. That's why I'm convinced when he promises you eternal life, if you trust in him, he ain't blowing smoke. He's speaking the truth.
Cliff says, if there's no God, we just rot. That part is true. What he gets wrong is assuming that's a problem. Just because the idea of death is uncomfortable doesn't make something else magically true. That's not evidence. That's wishful thinking. He also says people died for what they saw, as if martyrdom proves truth. But people die for all kinds of beliefs. Muslims, Hindus, even cult members like Heaven's Gate. Dying for something doesn't prove it's real. It just shows how strongly someone believed it. Cliff brings up Jesus' resurrection like it's a historical fact, but we don't have first-hand evidence. The Gospels were written decades later, anonymously, and contradict each other in key details. That's not strong historical data, it's hearsay. Hitchens was right to say, what can be asserted without evidence can be dismissed without evidence. And so far, Cliff hasn't given any evidence, just emotional appeals and stories written down 2,000 years ago. Let's hear Matt one more time.
One is this continued objection to, without God, there's no ultimate meaning, there's no real purpose. Well, I don't know what you mean by real purpose. That seems kind of cheaty. But as far as ultimate meaning, yes, I agree. No ultimate meaning in the existential sense that you're talking about it, and it doesn't matter one bit. The car that I've got out there parked in the parking lot, I've had for a couple of years. One of these days, it's going to rot away. Does that mean it's not valuable now? Does that mean it doesn't have any value to me now? Does it mean there's no purpose? Should I just go ahead and chuck it now? Let's get rid of it. Eventually, it's going to be useless. That's absurd. We all recognize that things have meaning and purpose right now because they are valuable to us. These are properties that we imbue things with and we imbue people with. Do I matter as much to you as your spouse? Bet you I don't, unless it's you. This idea that without the ultimate meaning, or if something is ultimately meaningless, doesn't mean it is always meaningless, or it doesn't mean it's meaningless in every way. This idea about morality, that it's all relative. Actually, I'm a staunch defender of absolute morality. And despite Cliff's straw man, I'm not saying that slavery is immoral because I said so. It might surprise some people to know that while I don't think there's intrinsic value, I think that there is value in people, and that's the value that we imbue them with. This idea that because I said so is the basis for secular morality is flatly absurd. It's the exact opposite of what I just finished talking about how you go through and you build up this system. We are physical beings in a physical universe that follows physical laws. There are truths to be discovered about how our actions benefit us and how our actions harm us. This is simply true. We don't need another mind. This is about the interaction of minds, but we don't need some transcendent mind to dictate what is true. We discover what is true about the reality that we inhabit. God or not, soul or not, we can choose everything on the list that Cliff just talked about being good to each other and building a productive society and caring and loving and trying to end poverty, trying to end oppression, and trying to build a better society. We can do all of that just because it's the right thing to do. There's no evidence for a soul. In fact, there's good evidence against it. There's no evidence or not enough evidence of the various God claims that are out there, or not any particularly good evidence, at least that I've been made aware of. But I could be wrong. And tomorrow, I could find out that there is a God and that I do have a soul. And it wouldn't change very much for me as far as how I end up living my life, because I've already come to good reasons to do things. I'm open to being corrected on them, but what's going to correct me is reason and evidence, not appealing to a God. And if people ask me, well, what are you going to do if you die and you end up standing before God? Hey, I tried. I used my brain. I followed the evidence where it was. And by the way, if your character is actually accurately depicted in the Bible or the Quran, I don't want nothing to do with you. I'm already morally superior to you. I already care more about people than you do. I know. I've never sanctioned slavery, never sanctioned genocide. Gods have. Do all religions lead to the same God? I don't know. I think it's unlikely. I think they clearly all define God differently. I think you could go right down into the same church on the same pew and get two different people, and they're going to define God differently, and they're going to have different views of God. I think there's as many different religions as there are people trying to practice them. And my concern isn't whether or not they all lead to the same God. It's what kind of world do they end up creating? Because why should I care about an afterlife that I don't know whether or not it exists when I've got a life that I know that I have, and I'd like to make it better? And if your religion is impeding on the ability of people who don't practice your religion, or those who do, from living the best life they can right now, then your religion's a problem. That goes for Islam and Christianity and Scientology and Hinduism and everything. If you're advocating something that is detracting from the good of this world, you're part of the problem.
Does being an atheist require the same faith that believing in God does?
No, seriously. It doesn't require any faith to not believe something. It doesn't. Now, if atheism was this assertion that there are no gods, ooh, I pissed some people off. If atheism was this assertion that there are no gods, well, then yes, you might be able to make a case that that was based on faith, or maybe it's not. It would depend on what the basis, what the foundation for that particular belief was. But atheism in the weak atheism sense of I do not believe this doesn't require faith. I don't believe there's a Bigfoot. That's not a faith. It's not a faith-based position. I'm not asserting certainty that there isn't a Bigfoot. I'm just not yet convinced. The Bigfoot claim hasn't met its burden of proof. Neither have alien abductions, which, by the way, I'll point out, you can actually go talk to real living people right now who will tell you their alien abduction story. Living, breathing people, you can talk to them. They will have stories that are similar in detail. In some cases, there are multiple people who have supposedly experienced this together. In some cases, the things that people have seen have been entire small towns. And you can interview these people. How many people think that they're actually being abducted by aliens? Not me. And that's people you can talk to right now. Somebody writes a couple books, in a couple thousand years, somebody could stand up and say, hey, look, I wouldn't believe it, but look at all of these accounts. These are firsthand people. They were interviewed by the news. We have a much better record of what was happening at the end of the 20th and beginning of 21st century than we do about what happened back when Jesus was supposedly alive or back around the time that Hinduism was being formed. This is a real record. We even have video footage of people talking about how they came down. And then they'll start tying it together in an intricate little web, the same way conspiracy theorists do right now. Oh, there were lizard people in the government or crop circles out there. We don't believe any of that, I hope. I am at Texas State. I kind of respect you guys because I don't care about colleges, so we're not in any rivalry. UT. But we don't believe that. Why should we? And yet we're expected to believe what is potentially a more extraordinary claim and weaker evidence. There's nothing particularly extraordinary about a universe that's billions, 13.7 billion years old, that there might be some other life somewhere. I don't know. Probably unlikely they made it this far. No reason for them to pick out Earth because we're not special, despite what many creationists would have you believe. They've got this wily coyote god who straps on a hat and balances on a wire and goes through all...
Matt makes a powerful case here. You don't need God to have meaning, purpose, or morality, and science backs him up. Studies in neuroscience, psychology, and evolutionary biology show that humans are wired for empathy, cooperation, and moral reasoning. Not because of religion, but because these traits helped us survive and thrive as social beings. Purpose doesn't have to come from some ultimate source to be real. It can come from love, family, creativity, curiosity, things we build and share. Just because something ends doesn't mean it was worthless. That's true for life, relationships, and even a good story. As for morality, Matt's right again. Objective moral systems can be built without appealing to a higher power. We observe the consequences of our actions. We learn what causes harm and what creates well-being. That's reason. That's evidence. And that's enough. Matt doesn't pretend to have all the answers. He just refuses to accept bad ones. He's willing to change his mind, but only for a good reason. That's intellectual honesty. And that's the foundation for a better world. So here's the question. If the life you're living now is the only one you're sure you have, what are you doing to make it count?
Totalitarian, and they're both based upon two very, very questionable and not very peaceful concepts. One is the idea of a perfect human being, the Prophet Muhammad, and the other is the idea of a perfect book, the Quran, the recitation. Therefore, any challenge to this faith is bound to lead to heresy and to schism, and does. And just as all forms of absolutism and totalitarianism, leader worship, and revealed truth unalterable text always do, because they can break, perhaps, but they cannot bend. And thus the latent potential of violence between them, among them, as well as within them, is very great. In which he ponders one very important question, the only one I've got time for now. What happened to the word Christendom? Remember, there used to be such a term. It used to extend across the world, and the hope is that it would extend even further. And it was unironically used to mean those areas of human civilization, and areas yet to be civilized, of course, where the word of Jesus Christ reigned or would reign. And it's all gone. The word is never used except historically or sarcastically now. And McCulloch doesn't say it ended because of the Crusades, though he could. It didn't. Crusades didn't kill it. Not because of slavery, mandated by Christianity. That didn't kill it either. Nor the mass murder of colonial subjects in the yet-to-be Christianized world. That wasn't sufficient. So it didn't really end, he said, till 1914, when all the Christian empires of the world, Austria-Hungary, Germany, France, Britain, France is a slight exception to this, but only a slight one, and Russia, all of them commanded by Christian emperors, and calling upon their subjects as Christians, went to war with each other and very nearly destroyed the whole human civilization, and certainly reduced it to a point where we can't guess where we might be if it hadn't been for this extraordinary outbreak of barbarism. And out of that came the terrors of fascism and of Stalinism, of which it was the seedbed as well. I mention this partly because I want to maintain that there's no such thing as a religion of peace by definition. And second, to point out, and that its best historian has to admit something that if I was a Christian would make me humiliated. But because there was another empire involved in that war, the Ottoman Empire, which also came to an end, its other name was the Caliphate, the Muslim Caliphate. It went to war on the side of German and Austrian imperialism and Hungarian imperialism, and it lost not just the war, having proclaimed a worldwide jihad against Christianity, except for German and Austrian and Hungarian Christianity, which were its allies. And it didn't just lose the war, but by 1924 had been dissolved by the Turkish leadership, by Ataturk. It lost the Caliphate. And that's the only one that still has supporters. The other Christian and religious empires have all gone. But the Caliphate still has fans, not just in the Muslim world, sometimes referred to by Muslims as the Dar al-Islam, the House of Islam, but also in what some Muslims call the Dar al-Harb, the House of War, the part of the world that isn't yet Muslim. There are Caliphate clubs in London now and Berlin and elsewhere, quite important ones. And what I want to know is why that is and what we should think about it. Believers in this fantasy have, Laurie's spared me the need to say much of this, have committed extraordinary atrocities in Istanbul, in Madrid, in India, in the Philippines, in Indonesia, and of course in our own fair city. And the pretexts for it vary. They can be, the excuse for the mass murder can be that Australia has helped East Timor become independent from Indonesia. They can be that Newsweek has printed a false story about the desecration of a supposedly holy book. You never know what it's going to be next. But everyone knows to be careful about it, and everyone understands that the threat of violence that backs it is believable. And that's my opening position. Now you will say, I can hear it already being said, you may be saying it already to yourselves because the defense mechanisms kick in. And in any case, Laurie already said it for you. And I hope Professor Ramadan won't feel the need to say it again, but if he does, fair enough. You may say, that's not the real Islam. Those aren't real Muslims. Now, isn't that a fascinating objection? Is there anyone in this room, I exempt Professor Ramadan because it's his turn to speak next, is there anyone in this room who would care to arbitrate that question? Who is to say, where is the authority that defines who is a true son of the prophet or true interpreter of his work? Part of the problem to begin with, and it's part of the problem because it is a religion, is that it's perfectly true to say we don't know who the true Muslims are. How right that is, who does speak for it. Only the second problem with defining Islam as peaceful, only the second problem with defining it as peaceful has to do with the fact that it's highly fissile and highly schismatic, that there is a civil war going on within it, the religion of peace. As we speak, at least one civil war between the votaries of this religion of peace is already taking place, and some of it is exported outside that world into ours, very salient fact. The first reason, though, is this. Islam makes very large claims for itself, very large claims indeed. It claims to be the last and final religion, the last and final revelation. When you see bumper stickers, everyone says you can't reduce major things to a bumper sticker. It's not my idea to have bumper stickers saying Islam is the solution. It's a well-known slogan, actually, of parties associated with the Muslim Brotherhood. They say Islam is the solution for everything. It takes care of all your life and the one to come. Sexuality, political economy, banking, diet, relations with other religions, everything. It's a total solution. What is creepy about the word total? I hope I don't have to tell an audience like this. It's the first 5 letters of the word totalitarian. It's absolute. It's absolute. It's all-inclusive. It's unanswerable. And oddly, for a religion that makes such large claims, notice another thing about Islam, it doesn't particularly like having these claims questioned or scrutinized. In other words, just as there is with all religions an inverse relationship between the claims they make and the evidence they can produce for them, you must have noticed that, with Islam, a younger religion, and perhaps therefore more in its first flush, there's an extraordinarily strong willingness to say that any challenge to its absolutist claims is by definition profane. And profanity and blasphemy can be the antecedent to very severe punishment, and often are, for Muslims and for non-Muslims. And this is not a road of peace, in my submission. Thus my first point completed.
Hitchens is right to reject the idea of any religion of peace by definition. History shows that both Christendom and the Caliphate were political empires as much as spiritual ones, spreading influence through war, colonialism, and control over daily life. The fall of Christian empires after World War I didn't end religious imperialism. The Ottoman Caliphate was only dissolved in 1924, and yet the idea still inspires movements today that openly call for global religious rule. Islam, like Christianity in its imperial phase, makes sweeping claims that it is the final revelation, the ultimate solution to politics, economics, law, and morality. That's not just belief, that's a blueprint for totalitarianism. When a system declares itself complete and beyond question, dissent becomes heresy, and heresy becomes punishable, sometimes by death. This isn't hypothetical, from apostasy laws in countries like Saudi Arabia and Iran to violent reactions over cartoons or books. The pattern is clear. Any ideology that claims authority over every part of life, demands immunity from criticism, and enforces obedience with threats cannot honestly be described as peaceful. Peace requires the freedom to question without fear.
The claim to govern everything from hygiene to sex and the afterlife, which contains detailed prescriptions for the good and bad versions of itself, again strikes me as somewhat totalitarian, and they're both based upon two very, very questionable and not very peaceful concepts. One is the idea of a perfect human being, the Prophet Muhammad, and the other is the idea of a perfect book, the Quran, the recitation. Now, the category perfect human primate or mammal and the category flawless book that could possibly not use any kind of change, revision, or editing are categories that do not exist. There are no members of these categories. Therefore, any challenge to this faith is bound to lead to heresy and to schism, and does. And just as all forms of absolutism and totalitarianism, leader worship and revealed truth, unalterable text, always do, because they can break, perhaps, but they cannot bend. And thus the latent potential of violence between them, among them, as well as within them, is very great. And at any moment, someone is in danger of being accused of being an apostate or an unbeliever. This week, the Coptic Pope of Egypt, Pope Shenouda, who represents 10 million Egyptians, was hustled onto Egyptian TV. He's not asked on all that often. I don't think he was even asked on this time. I think he was told he'd better come on. Why is the leader of Egypt's huge Christian minority suddenly compelled to make a TV appearance? Because one of his bishops had said in an interview that he thought that some of the verses of the Quran showed signs of having been added later on and to have been later accretion. And Pope Shenouda was forced onto the television to say, it's not that that didn't happen, it's it couldn't have happened. It shouldn't even be discussed. So that it has to be claimed even by non-Muslim subjects of a Muslim state that there is, after all, because no Christian claims this about the Bible anymore, no Jew claims it about the Pentateuch. After all, yes, there is just one book that's completely word and letter perfect from the first time it was not even written down, but recited. Now, demands that you believe the impossible do not lead to peaceful outcomes. Nor do they lead to peaceful or tolerant regimes. And I'm not going to ask you which Muslim country you would like to live in. I don't know whether Professor Ramana will tell us which one he would pick if he had to, because I don't have to ask you a question like that, because it's already in your mind.
Can you wind up now?
Yes, I can. I can, yes, and will. Shall, in fact. Sexual repression doesn't lead to peace. The idea that women are inferior to men is a profound cause of unease, let's say the least of it. All religions make some form of this claim. Islam seems to make it less apologetically than most. Claims that the world will come to an end in an apocalyptic form, which will lead to the victory of one religion or another, are not peaceful either. It's possible, perhaps, I haven't exhausted all my remarks, that the endless teaching of battle stories to children and the stories of lethal feuds from 7th century Arabia don't lead to peace, or the forcing of children to memorize and retell such stories by rote doesn't lead to peace either. It's arguable that peace isn't attainable at all. It may be arguable in some forms that sometimes in places that religion isn't even desirable, but it will not come by the fanatical adoption of a man-made text and a man-made supreme leader. Nothing but war and tyranny has ever come from the adoption of formulae like these. The only way to moral and intellectual satisfaction, even temporary, perhaps only temporary, but of any kind at all, comes to those who are willing to take the great risk of thinking for themselves at all hazards and trying to share the benefits of that tolerance and that open-mindedness with others. And with that, for now, I'll rest my case. Thank you very much.
Hitchens is right. The idea of a flawless human and a flawless book has no precedent in reality. No person is morally perfect. Even Muhammad's own biography in Islamic sources records acts like ordering assassinations of critics and waging wars of expansion. No text is beyond revision. The Quran itself wasn't compiled until decades after Muhammad's death, and early manuscripts like the Sana'a palimpsest show textual variations. Yet Islamic orthodoxy treats questioning this as a crime, punishable by prison or death in countries from Pakistan to Iran. This isn't just history. In 2023, a man in Nigeria was sentenced to death for a WhatsApp message deemed blasphemous, and in Saudi Arabia, women have been jailed for tweeting criticism of religious policy. The belief that women are inherently inferior is codified in laws on inheritance, Quran 4:11, testimony 2:282, and dress, fostering systemic inequality. Teaching children violent tales of 7th century battles as moral lessons ensures cycles of sectarian hatred, just as Bible-based justifications for slavery and holy war once did in Christianity.
When I got the question, of course, as a Muslim and as a believer, but as someone who is coming from within the realm of religions, it was quite clear that to put it that way was not the right question to ask. Is Islam a religion of peace, or is Christianity, or is Judaism, or is Buddhism a religion or a spirituality of peace? Doesn't mean anything for me. It's not the right question. It's not the accurate question. Not because I think that there is a good Islam and the right Islam, and there are people who are acting in the name of Islam who are not representing what Islam is. This is not my point. I never said that, by the way. But the point for me is really to try to deal with a phenomenon, with religion from within, and to try to understand the dynamics and to understand the trends and to understand the diversity. So just to essentialize one religion by saying it's all about war, it's all about peace, and even, said by George W. Bush, doesn't mean anything for me. So this is one point which is important. But religions, and all the religions, and Islam among all the other religions, are dealing with human beings. And if you deal with human beings, you deal with violence and you deal with peace. You deal with violence. Because human beings, by definition, have to do with violence. They have to deal with aggressivity, with wars. And to expect from a religion not to tackle the issue is just to dream of something which is not going to happen. All the spirituality, go for Buddhism or go for the Bhagavad Gita, you deal with violence. So this is it. Now, what is the answer coming from religions and from trends when it comes to violence and to peace? This is the right question for me. Do we have something which is coming and helping us to go towards peace? This is, for me, the right question. So now, once again, when I have people speaking from outside, and it's especially the case these days when it comes to Islam, is we speak about Islam and we speak about, something which is a religion that is perceived through one window or through one interpretation, and we very often take what is visible through the media. But Islam is as complex as Christianity and Judaism and Buddhism and Hinduism. It's a diversity of interpretations. Yes, you are right. The Quran is, for the Muslims, the very word of God. But many interpretations and many ways of dealing with the books. The problem is not the book, the problem is the reader. Is the way... No, we have only 10 minutes. So... this is why when, for example, you take a text, and you can do this with the Bible, with the Torah, the Gospels, it's always the same. Tell me the way you read, I will know what is in your mind, but not for sure what is in the text. And this is something which is the starting point of a serious discussion in theology. Because I don't like all these intellectuals and philosophers and even journalists. They are very keen on understanding the complexity of philosophies and the simplicity of religions. That's not right. And the one to blame sometimes are the religious people themselves, because the way they present their religion is something which is all of dream and hopes and not dealing with the reality, which is a complex reality. And this is where I think we have to come to a better understanding. So very often when I deal with such topics, I just have to start with the very beginning. We want to deal with the religion, let us speak about religious issues and religious understanding, not to avoid the starting to just to come to newspapers and headlines. It's not going to help us to understand religion just to go for what is happening in the world. Let us also understand the fundamentals and then come to some of the translation, the historical experiences. Because as much as you can speak about September 11, you can speak about the 16th century under the empire, the Ottoman Empire, which was a great civilization with a diversity, Christians and Jews and even non-believers working and living together. We are always speaking about Andalusia. But we can't prove everything with history if we don't get a sense of what are the principles we are talking about. So, for example, coming from a religious viewpoint, I wouldn't say Islam is the religion of peace. I say Islam is a religion for human beings. It deals with peace and it deals with violence. And it helps the people to go from violence towards peace. It's a way towards peace. but it's not a peaceful reality, because we are not peaceful beings. We are all in tension. Just to get that inner peace in us, and this is the starting point of the Islamic philosophy of human being, is really to start with your own self. Look at your heart and tell me if you are at peace or you were at peace. Peace is a process through which you have, it's a process that you get at the end of a self-education. Educate yourself to get this inner peace. This is coming from the universal message of all the religions. You get this in Buddhism, before even speaking, or not even speaking about one God, but you get it in Judaism, you get it in Christianity. Educate yourself to get that peace. So you have to deal with your inner wars and tensions. So this is the way we have to deal with the issue about peace. And the starting point is spirituality. Why? Because at the end of the day, it's really something which is important. And this is the difference that you can find between Islam and the Greek tradition. If you come back to Socrates, Socrates was saying your body in itself is bad. And this is why you have the soul helping you to educate your body and to master your body. In Islam, there is nothing like that. Your body is not bad, is not good, and your soul is not bad, is not good. It depends on what you are going to make out of it. It's your responsibility because you are free. Your dignity is in your freedom, and you have to use your freedom to make it bad or to make it good. Take the good decision for your body, that's good. Make the bad decision, that's bad. So it's all a question of educating yourself with your own body. And it's exactly the same when it comes to the understanding of the world. So this way towards peace, it's based on education. It's based on a spiritual way of dealing with yourself. And you know what is the meaning of that? The very essence of what I'm trying to translate now is jihad. So this is something which is coming from the classical tradition. And once again, the classical tradition is helping us understand jihad is resist the bad to promote the good. And the bad is in yourself first. And then you will try to get the good. And to get the good is this inner peace. So jihad is not the way towards war, it's the way towards peace. Because you have, as a human being, intrinsically to deal with your inner wars and inner tensions. It's exactly the same in the world, that what we have to do, you will find something which is the will of God. What is the will of God? Diversity. He made you tribes and nations in order for you to know each other. But you know the risk of diversity? It could be lots of knowledge and potential wars. So you have to educate yourself to live with others and with this diversity to know each other. So you can look at Islam saying, you know what Islam claims? It's the last and final religion. It's not enough to end with this sentence. The most important thing is what Islam is saying about the other religions. That you have to remove them from the earth? No. He made you tribes and nations in order for you to know each other. So respect the Christians, respect the Jews, respect the people who were before you. So it's a call towards respect that you find also in the texts. So yes, you will have Muslims. They will take one dimension and interpret this as it is the final religion, we are not going to deal with all the others. But you cannot deny the fact that through history, Muslims, in many situations, in many historical situations, were dealing with this diversity, and we learned from the Middle Ages, and we learned from the Ottoman Empire that Muslims are able to deal with diversity and take from the Jewish tradition. Maimonides was speaking Arabic better than me. He was a Jew, and he was an intellectual, and he was a theologian, and he was dealing with respectful people. So all these Muslims were wrong Muslims because they didn't understand that the final religion should not listen to the first monotheistic tradition? That's not true. You cannot reduce this in such a way. It's too simplistic to represent what a religion is and what a history and a historical experience is. So this is for me something which has to do with the diversity that we have, that it's rooted in the Islamic tradition as well, in the classical tradition that we find it. So when you deal with diversity, know that you need to promote, and it's out of your personal education, mutual knowledge, to get respect. But you also have to deal sometimes with oppressors and people who are going to try to take over, and you have to resist. And this resistance, in order to reform the world for the better, is the very meaning of jihad. Now, once again, I will never deny the fact that some Muslims, some theologians, in history and now, are using some of the verses in a way which is, for me, unacceptable. And I go even further than that. Just after September 11, when I was invited by Time, I came here and I was asked about this. I said, you know what? It's not only not good and not Islamic, it's anti-Islamic what they are doing. It's against my religion. It's against the principles. So I'm not saying this is the good religion and this is bad. I acknowledge the fact that they are interpreting the text in a way. But what I'm saying from where I am, from within my tradition, is this is anti-Islamic. This is not the right way to deal with the text. So you cannot reduce this into something which is, oh, the only right Muslims are the Muslims who are acting the way I believe Islam is, meaning bad.
Ramadan argues that no religion should be labeled entirely peaceful or violent, but this sidesteps the real issue. When a religion claims divine authority and demands obedience to its texts, it inevitably shapes laws, punishments, and moral codes. And those codes often violate universal human rights. In Islam, the Quran prescribes corporal punishments like flogging for fornication, 24.2, death for apostasy, Hadith, Sahih al-Bukhari, 9.84.57, and subjugation of non-Muslims under jizya tax, 929. Christianity's Bible carries its own moral failures, endorsing slavery, Ephesians 6:5, genocide, 1 Samuel 15:3, and eternal punishment for disbelief, Mark 16 mani 16 nimidam. Ramadan's appeal to diversity ignores that Islamic empires, including the Ottomans, imposed second-class dhimmi status on Jews and Christians, restricting property rights, dress, and worship. The coexistence he praises existed only under Islamic supremacy, not genuine equality. Likewise, Christian Europe's so-called tolerance during the Middle Ages still burned heretics and expelled Jews. The problem isn't misinterpretation. It's that the foundational texts contain both peaceful and violent commands, giving extremists theological ammunition. Hitchens' point stands. A perfect leader and an unalterable book create systems that can't reform without breaking. True peace isn't built by filtering ancient laws through modern PR. It's built when ideas, sacred or not, can be questioned without fear. What do you think? Can a religion whose holy texts endorse violence ever truly be a foundation for peace? Let me know in the comments, and don't forget to like and subscribe.